Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. We're asking for your help to share stories from all of Idaho's 44 counties, like this one on the Spencer Opal Mines, where we learned about their unique pink opals.
The pink is from an iron and manganese deposit. Like typically what you would see that turns those beautiful pools colors in Yellowstone is what gives our opal those fancy background colors.
You can send your ideas to Idaho Matters at boisestate.edu and then listen for our Idaho 44 project weekdays at noon and 8 on Idaho Matters. You're listening to Idaho Matters from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudette. Nearly 6 years ago, if you can believe it, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 to be a global pandemic. And within days, much of the world shut down, leaving millions of people at home, including writer and former College of Idaho professor John Rember. Now, from the isolation of Sawtooth Valley, Rember started keeping a journal. He wrote about his daily life and what was happening in the world beyond his doorstep. Now, those entries became a 3-part series titled Journal of the Plague Years. And John is joining us now to talk more about this series. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So how did living in the Sawtooth Valley shape the way you experienced and wrote about the pandemic?
Well, we live in a valley that's surrounded by walls, mountains, and so we're naturally isolated. When the pandemic started appearing on the news, we were hearing mostly about Sun Valley because Sun Valley was an early hotspot in the COVID pandemic. We sort of hid out, and but the big thing for me was that I was just about ready to start a book tour for a book called 100 Little Pieces on the End of the World. And my End of the World book sort of got canceled by the end of the world.
So when did you realize that these journal entries were really truly becoming a record of history? I mean, they weren't just personal reflection.
No, not at all. In fact, I envisioned a Roman citizen in 410 AD with Alaric at the gates, writing down a journal. And if we had that journal, it would be a really valuable historical document. So I consciously started writing something for people 1,000 years in the future. So that was my original audience. And then after a while, I started writing for people that are living today.
So the first volume, volume 1, it's called Endnotes, and it literally ends with you and your wife getting vaccinated. So why didn't the story end there for you?
Well, getting vaccinated really wasn't the end-all be-all that we had thought it might be and hoped it might be. It didn't end your chances of getting COVID, and it was a very uncertain situation. And in that uncertain situation, I started looking around and still thinking of people in the future. And there were a number of other plagues going on, particularly climate and the Ukraine war was about to start, and I felt that there were a lot of other things that qualified as pestilence, and so the original historical reason for writing a journal was still there. In fact, it was multiplied.
Well, and your journals, they're so interesting because they mix daily life with global crisis, like you mentioned, the start of the Ukraine war. So how did you balance, the personal as well as the historical when you were writing?
When we started editing these journals for publication, um, I began to notice things that I hadn't known I was doing when I was writing them down. And one of the things is I've always um, thought that I really didn't have much agency in the world, and that was fine. Um, but I began to see that I had been concerned with agency in the microcosm, in the very small details of our lives, where free will was a factor. There were giant forces in the world, and they were running our lives and threatened to interrupt it at any moment. But the small things we could enjoy. So I was going back and forth from the big events of the world news to what we were doing in the afternoons here. And that was usually getting out into the woods, either on skis or hiking in the summer, and seeing what there was to see. We became witnesses of the small, and that, in a way, helped us become witnesses to the really big things that we didn't have any control over.
So I want to talk a little bit more about something you said in regards to, realizing that there were more plagues than just COVID, right? So you mentioned climate change, but what about climate change, even politics and war? What makes them part of the same crisis, in your opinion?
Climate change is fairly serious stuff. And, I say that I was born in 1950, so the Club of Rome's Limits to Growth came out in 1972, and it has proven to be this fairly prophetic document about when we were going to poison ourselves with pollution, run out of resources, and maybe have population problems. It seems to be right on when you look at it now. So we can't say we weren't warned really early on. And then I suppose when Carl Sagan spoke to Congress in 1985 and said, you either fix this now or fix it later, and it's going to be a lot harder to fix later, that was another warning. I think looking at what I was able to observe, it was time for somebody to witness and tell the truth about what is happening. I think climate change, and here we are in Sawtooth Valley with no snow on the ground in the middle of January. Climate change is real.
Your last part of the series, you call it Aftermath, and you put a spotlight on dignity as well as compassion between people. Why is that where hope still lives for you?
Well, I think hope lives in the relationships that we have with others. And those relationships get a lot more hopeful when we treat each other with dignity. That provides meaning in life. You can't really do much with your life unless you can give it meaning. And so, once again, looking at the microcosm, the friendships that Julie and I have, the marriage that we have, that's the meaning of life for me now. I'm certainly not finding it in the larger world. And that sounds really depressing, but it's not. I think that we have some really strong ethical traditions that we can refer to, we can live in, and those traditions make for a very good life and allow us to let our happiness coexist with our grief.
So, amid the loss and the uncertainty, especially during the pandemic, what kept you noticing, though, those small moments of joy or hope?
Well, they're pretty hard to ignore.
Mhm.
They glitter. Um, they're part of a beautiful world, and in spite of all its flaws, we still live in a beautiful world. We just have to focus on maybe a little closer to ourselves, um, and um, I'm not saying the world is doomed. There are plenty of people who
Mhm.
are, but um, I think of once again the people who made it through 410 AD in Rome, and we call what happened then the Dark Ages, but it was full of life. It was full of joy, and people survived. So, in a way, I thought I was writing a um, sort of a self-help book for tough times and a way to stay sane in the face of terrible events and terrible grief.
So, it's been almost 6 years since the beginning of the pandemic, which truly blows my mind when I think about that. I'm curious about if you've gone back and reread those early entries, and if you have, what strikes you the most? I mean, what stands out the most to you?
Well, we started editing the first volume um, once we had decided to publish these books. And I couldn't believe, even though I'd written these journal entries, I couldn't believe how much we had forgotten and just kind of stuffed down
Mm.
the memory hole. And in talking with other people, they would say the same thing. Did you remember what it was like when Sun Valley had the greatest concentration per capita of COVID in the nation? Um, no, I'd forgotten that. Oh my God, that's tough.
Hmm.
Um, that's a tough realization. And to my mind, we've also forgotten how much things have changed. And we've kind of papered that over with denial that things have changed, but they have changed enormously, and our world has changed enormously. And in the very last volume, that's what I was trying to record. Uh, how much things had changed, how you live in a world where a lot of institutions have lost their force or disappeared altogether.
Mm. So before I let you go, I do want people to know that you have some readings coming up in both McCall and in Caldwell. Can you tell us when and where those will take place?
Uh, in McCall on Tuesday, January 20th at 6 p.m., I'll be reading at the McCall Public Library, and we'll bring some books and I'll sign them afterward. On the 23rd of January, I'll be reading at the College of Idaho in the Langroyce Recital Hall at 6:30 p.m. And Jocelyn Skinner of Shared Stories Books will be selling books there.
Well, I want to thank you so very much for taking time to talk with us about this. We've been speaking with John Rember about his three-part book series about the COVID-19 pandemic. It's called Journal of the Plague Years. This is the Idaho Matters podcast. I'm Gemma Gaudet.
How does AI even work? Where does creativity come from? What's the secret to living longer? TED Radio Hour explores the biggest questions with some of the world's greatest thinkers. They will surprise, challenge, and even change you. Listen to NPR's TED Radio Hour wherever you get your podcasts.